In this video, I'm going to talk about the importance of design when presenting textual information. Many principles of information architecture that are used in the field of website design also apply to course design in Blackboard, so I would like to start by looking at a few of the common web design myths. One of the most common ones is that scrolling is bad. The important content should be above the fold or on the screen without having to scroll down to it, kind of like a newspaper. The fact is that scrolling not only makes it easier to read, and this is found in a study by the Software Usability Research Lab at Wichita State University, it makes it easier to get a feel for the whole content landscape, if you will. And now with so many sizes of screens from phones to tablets and large displays, scrolling has become accepted as the norm. But one caveat is that the content should be chunked, and we'll talk more about that soon. Another myth is that design is just about making it pretty, that it's a frivolous concern. But I would argue that good design of a page of text helps readers, whereas poor design gets in the way of understanding the message, and that it can lead to subtle frustration. Maybe not so subtle sometimes. Steve Jobs said, "Design is not just about how it looks and feels, design is about how it works." Another myth is that redundancy is good, so a lot of redundancy must be better. And in this case, by redundancy, I mean putting the same information in multiple places. For example, listing assignments in the syllabus, in the schedule, and in the assignments area in the course module, and maybe a few other places. And so this is not only confusing to students, but it can be very confusing to you as well. It's better to reduce the options. Keep it simple, consistent, and clear. One of the top usability experts, Steve Krug, wrote a book called Don't Make Me Think. And this refers to navigation, particularly in designing websites, making it nearly effortless to find what you're looking for. It sounds paradoxical to apply this to students in a course, but what I mean by it is, if a course isn't organized thoughtfully, students will expend their cognitive energy, if you will, on the challenge of just getting around and figuring out where they're supposed to go next, rather than on doing the activities that you want them to do for learning. This creates frustration in the students, and it can end up being a time sink for faculty as well, who have to answer a lot of questions that are emailed to them. So the goal is to avoid something we call cognitive drag. And by that I mean getting slowed down by searching for information that should be easy to find. So to do this, the first thing to consider is consistent labeling. For example, here are 4 ways of labeling lecture notes. And the inconsistency not only looks unprofessional and disorganized, but parsing them, especially a full list of them, causes cognitive drag. Instead, pick a labeling style and just be consistent with it. And then rhythm. Consistent rhythm means organizing your teaching modules or units, whatever you decide to call them, into a regular format. Giving them this consistent form instills confidence in the students and allows them to focus on learning rather than form. So what we want to do is to protect students from an experience like this, where they're confused and lost, wondering what to do next and where to go next, and instead create a course more like this, where it's simple and clear and obvious what they need to do next and how to get there. So using explicit directions are important as well. For example, submit your thoughts in the discussion board on Wednesday. It can be a little more specific, 150-word discussion post on Wednesday. Now let's add the time and the date. We want it by midnight on Wednesday, 12/4. And where to the forum titled Point of View. And finally, chunking. Chunking is just a way of breaking up content into bites that are easier to digest. There's a great deal of research that's been done on successful web writing, and not everything can be applied to a course, obviously, but some of it can. And chunking is a way of formatting for readability. Because another myth is that your students will pore over everything you've written. And the fact is, even though you ask them to, they'll scan. That's what most of us do on the web. And at the end of the video, I'll provide a link to a page with more information about studies that support this claim. So here's a little chunking game. I'll show some shapes for 3 seconds, and then I'll show them again with a different organization, and then again with a third type of organization. Each time you get 3 seconds of viewing, and in the end you can decide which is easiest to quantify. So here's the first one. And now for the second one. And now for the third one. Most people find this slide to be the easiest to sort out quickly, and it just demonstrates what ordered and consistent visual presentation can do. It makes it much easier for us to understand what we're seeing. Now let's look at an example of a menu in Blackboard. It has a number of links randomly placed, and here's the same information organized into areas of course content on the top, course tools, and resources, using chunking so that it's easier for students to find what they're looking for. This is an example of how your course modules can be organized, consistently titled with dates. Here's another example of folder organization. Here's an example of just a bulleted list, and the same bulleted list, this time broken up into chunks with headers. Now I want to compare two web pages. Here's the first web page where no effort has been made to chunk the information or organize it to make it easier to read. It has large amounts of text in each paragraph. And it's daunting and probably won't be completely read. And here's one that is more clearly organized. It's the same exact content but broken into bulleted lists and subsections, headers and subheaders. Bolding is used, and a writing technique called the inverted pyramid, where the conclusion is at the beginning of the paragraph and it's followed by the supporting evidence. So in conclusion, the 4 best practices we've covered are consistent labeling, consistent rhythm, explicit directions, and chunking. If you go to this web address, WWR stands for Web Writing Resources, you'll find links to the studies and articles that support the information in this video.